Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the JCC of Metro Detroit's 69th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. My name is Brenda Brook, and I'm chair of the Book Fair Steering Committee. And it's my pleasure to welcome you on this Tuesday morning to our opening event with Johanna Silver, author of Growing Weed in the Garden. The goal of the Detroit Jewish Book Fair is to bring the best new Jewish books and authors from around the world to Metro Detroit. And this year, the rooms we're all sitting in may be different, but that purpose remains the same. The book fair runs through December 9th, and we have an exceptional lineup of events planned. To see our full schedule, learn about ways to support book fair, watch events you might have missed, and find our online store where you can buy Growing Weed in the Garden and find plenty of other hand-selected books and gifts, visit our website at culturalarts.jccdet.org book fair. This year, in order to provide as much programming as possible to the community, we've made all of our events free of charge. So if you enjoy this event and other book fair events, please consider becoming a patron or donating to book fair. Remember, today is Giving Tuesday. You can do either or both at our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org book fair. We rely on community support to make this annual event possible. So thank you in advance for becoming part of our family. We have a really special event for you this morning, and we want you to be a part of it. You can ask questions and offer comments in the YouTube comment section below, or by texting to the number up in the corner of your screen. Our speakers have a great discussion prepared, and they'll take as many of your questions as they can. And while you're here at our YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the reminder bell. That way you'll never miss any of our exciting events. The focus of today's event is Growing Weed in the Garden, filled with gorgeous photos and step-by-step instructions on how to grow, dry, cure, and store cannabis. This book is the definitive and first ever guide that leads you from seed to harvest. We have with us this morning the author of this coffee table gardening book, Johanna Silver, as well as Lisa Waud, who will moderate the discussion. Johanna is a James Beard award-winning author and contributing editor at Better Homes and Gardens. She spent 10 years at Sunset Magazine, starting with a shovel in her hand and culminating as head of the garden department. Lisa Waud, our moderator, is a botanical installation artist who uses plants and flowers to explore themes of the space between living and decaying, nature as a cleansing reset, and joy from beauty. Please join me in welcoming Johanna Silver and Lisa Waud. Hi, Johanna.
Hi, Lisa. Good morning.
It's so nice to see you again. Good morning. And it's early for you in California, yes?
Yeah, 8 a.m.
All right.
Got my
Did
coffee.
your 3-year-old garden intern wake you up this morning?
Of course, he wakes me up every morning. And he will hopefully leave us alone. But we'll see.
That's the joy and excitement of working from home, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So I am so thrilled to be chatting with you for this book fair. I'm just going to go ahead and blow all my credibility out right at the beginning. I am not Jewish and I don't smoke weed, so I feel very honored to be here. I will say that your book has really heightened my interest in growing weed in my own garden. I'm an avid gardener and I'm very passionate about plants and flowers. So I'm excited to dig into this book with you. With thanks from that great intro, and I just wanted to have you tell a little bit about your current live and work experience. From your Instagram, we know that you have, as I said, your 3-year-old garden intern, and tell me a little bit about your current life and anything else you want to add to that bio that we need to know about you for our conversation.
Thank you. Well, I did go to the University of Michigan. I'm a Denver native, and I did go to Michigan. Go Blue. So I feel a little bit of a Detroit area connection. My life right now is, my book came out. This is my book. It's beautiful, if I may say so myself. I had a lot of help with the beautiful part. My book came out on March 24th. So if you think back to what was happening March 24th, that's when the book came out into the world. And yeah, so everything's been really, really different. And I'm so grateful to places like the Detroit JCC for going all virtual and letting authors get the word out. And yeah, I have a 3.5-year-old, and I am a freelance writer at this point, and this is my second book. And if anyone has an idea for the third, then I'll get to work on that.
Yeah, please drop your ideas in the chat for Johanna for her third book.
Yeah, but I want to say, Lisa,
yes.
I am Jewish, and I also am not a huge weed smoker or user, and I think that is, I mean, we'll talk about this, but that's why you're perfect to discuss the book with, because this isn't a book written by a stoner for stoners, which is sort of all that there is out there. There are some great books, but oh yeah, should we just go into that? Yeah, so I worked in a magazine called Sunset Magazine, which I don't know if you guys have heard of out there in the Midwest, but it's because it's sort of West Coast. And I worked there for 10 years, and I started in the editorial test garden and worked my way to be trusted indoors, and eventually was the head of the garden department. So a friend told me, you can't call it the head of a department when it's a department of one, because, you know, publishing is sort of tanking. But anyway, so I was the head of the garden department at Sunset Magazine, and I did things like travel to Alaska to write about peonies. And Jamie, the next slide, I think, is the rugged, oh, that's cute. She said, sorry, she jumped the gun. No problem. You know, traveled down south to San Diego to do proteas. So the point is, like, I am, and you could probably go back just to the two of us, very much like from the mainstream gardening world. Nothing cannabis about me since high school.
I think that I'm actually surprised that it took this long for our paths to cross. I lived out west. I lived in Portland, Oregon, worked at a really beautiful nursery there, and garden writers and magazines were always doing pieces there. And I know your first book about the Ruth Bancroft garden, after we had started talking about having this conversation, I realized that I had actually applied to be an intern there. And so I think we've had a lot of cross paths. And but our friend Deborah Prinzing from Slow Flowers over in Seattle actually sent an email to me a while ago saying, do you know anyone who would like to interview Johanna for the book fair? And I said, stop everything, it's me. And I've been so happy to be getting to know you over Zoom over this past season. So I feel that when Deborah connected us and we decided that we wanted to have this conversation, in getting to know one another on Zoom calls, I think that we realized that we had a bit in common as far as the work that I do and the book that you've just written about weed. Can you talk a little bit about that discovery that we made together?
I'm blanking.
Oh, sorry,
you're prompting me
like that.
No.
Take another swig of coffee. I'll talk a little bit about it. So I think that a lot of the work that I do is it's about bringing beauty to people. And I work in a very collaborative way that is really about, it's about using plants and flowers as the vessel to bring people together. And so I think that, and I also think there's like a little bit of like kind of a punk ethos in the work that I do. And sometimes it can feel a little standoffish for some people, but really ultimately the work I do is inclusive and collaborative. And I think that when I read your book, I saw a lot of similarities between the work that I do and the weed industry and the human stories that you encountered when you were writing this book. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So weed for me, and I call it weed, I think there's a lot of, as cannabis gets legalized, there's some push in the industry to always call it cannabis to make it more professional sounding, and I think that's great. For me, it's a more natural weed. It just feels more natural, so I use weed in the book and cannabis in the book interchangeably. I don't use the term marijuana because it's got some racist underpinnings from when it really started being used in our lexicon. But yes, so cannabis for me started as an assignment, actually, when I lost my job the last week of maternity leave, which is another presentation for another day, and
the after party.
Right, and I emailed every editor I'd ever written for because I was desperate to keep working, and a former editor of mine had landed at the San Francisco Chronicle, and she asked me to grow. We were just on the cusp of recreational use being like in effect. We had voted it in, but it was going into effect. And she asked me to grow weed in my backyard and document it for the San Francisco Chronicle as a gardener. And I just was like, I don't know where to get seeds. And she was like, that's your opening line. And so, this is how it came into my world. And, I didn't feel that much like stigma necessarily around it. I will say I don't show myself using it in my book. So I think we're all still, figuring out our relationship to it. The one picture of anybody smoking pot in my book is my brother, who flew in to smoke my weed. This is my brother with a gold lined joint. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I was working, I knew no one in the weed industry. I knew nothing. And one of the things that Lisa, that we talked about was like, when I wrote this book, I knew that I really wanted to get it right for all of these new contacts and mentors that I had made within the cannabis space. I wanted to do them right because this is the first time a lot of them can be talking openly about their lives. And what I wasn't expecting was how much it would mean for me, for the mainstream garden world to accept me. And that's meant a lot more because as it's come out, people have written, like some of the places that I spoke to in my first book, I email them, I have my book out, and they say like, oh, we're not interested. And then they get the book and they're like, oh, okay, she's actually just treating this as a plant. Like, I'm a gardener, this is a plant, this is one of the plants in my garden, and I think if you learn weed from a weed person, you're going to learn how to grow weed with all of this like weird weed lingo that has come from 100-ish years of prohibition and being grown in closets where you're sort of like acting like God instead of just, nature. And so I really believe that if you read my book, it's like connecting it to determinate tomatoes, or how it was like quinoa, or how it was like this, that, or the other. So yeah, I mean, there is an element of it being like, ugh, for some people. Yeah. But you guys are legal out there in Michigan.
It's funny that you mentioned tomatoes. At the nursery that I worked at in Portland, I told you this before, we would wear walkie-talkies because it was on like 2 city blocks. And when people would come in and ask about certain fertilizers and everything, and it became clear that people were growing weed quietly, secretly, we had a code over the radio that said, I need some help with indoor tomatoes. And it was our code word because it was so literally like closeted. And it's just really exciting how far it's come that this is a book about growing weed in your garden out in the open and integrating it in with your flowers and your vegetables and fruits. It's really exciting. I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you felt very embraced by the weed community. I loved when you talked a bit about your first friend was this friend named Nat, and he really welcomed you in and kind of shed a lot of the kind of gave you a lot of vocabulary and really helped you and showed you the way in.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I can't I can't stress how little I knew about growing cannabis. Zero. And so I was, and I obviously I learned a ton. So one of my main mentors is somebody named Nat Pennington, who is the founder of Humboldt Seed Company. And a lot of the thing with cannabis right now is because of it's still being federally illegal. There's not a lot of brand crossover between state lines. So if I'm telling you about this awesome seed company in California, can't necessarily get the seeds in Michigan, although they are working on getting their genetics out. Oklahoma might be the closest to, no, well, you guys aren't. I'm showing my like lack of geography. I mean, like, Oklahoma, is that
It's a bit of a drive.
But interesting because cannabis, so when you buy a packet of tomatoes, let's say, you know, it's a couple bucks and you have all the information you need on the back of the seed packet, how big the plant is going to get, you know, what it needs, the spacing, and nothing like that exists in cannabis. Zero. You get a packet of seeds that are not $2, you know, it's like $100 or something crazy. And really the only description on it is how high you're going to get and what the high is going to feel like, and really no grow information. And the state of cannabis genetics is really different from everything else, because every other plant you can think of has gone through a modern breeding program associated with university funding, you know, has had disease resistance bred in, all sorts of things. And with weed, the paper trail, as you might imagine, is really limited because all of this documentation adds to your prison sentence. So one of the things I really loved about working with Nat is that he has a background as a marine biologist. So he was working specifically on like proving that this certain run of salmon was genetically distinct from other salmon in order to get a dam removal project going. It's just about to start, the biggest dam removal in California. And he was talking about like meeting with Jerry Brown when he was governor, and all the while being sort of like a clandestine weed breeder. And then when it went legal, he was like, you know what, this is my passion. And so breeding is itself a full-time job. And it can be challenging to get a stable seed. So knowing where your seeds are coming from, it's sort of similar, like it's similar to how we've all gotten used to sort of tracing where our food comes from, the sort of questions you might, just the prodding questions you might ask, like anything to see if there's any sort of transparency, you know, like who does the breeding? Tell me about the lineage. Is it stable? Where's the farm? Just these sort of questions to sort of get used to it. And I always, I grow from seed. You can grow from seed or clone. And clone is a word that is, you know, the rest of gardening, we would call it a vegetative cutting. You know, it's a cutting off of a mother plant, but in weed, it's always a clone. And one of the reasons that people like to grow from clone is that it's a guarantee of that you're growing the mother plant. But from a gardening perspective, it's, you know, a seed grown plant grows a strong taproot right from the start and is a much more resilient plant. Seed starting scares some people, but I really encourage all of you to not be shy. It's really like seed starting and compost are like the two most magical things in gardening, and it's really quite simple. And a seed baby is actually a lot like a juvenile. Like my 3-year-old is a lot more resilient, right? He's like a rubber ball. He heals really quickly. A juvenile plant is similarly really resilient to subpar conditions and things like that.
I think you're really close to a haiku comparing your son with a baby weed plant.
Yeah, sure. And if you grow, you should know, like, there's nothing you can. So yeah, so I have this young son, and there's nothing about the weed plant growing in the garden that could get him high. Zero. Nothing. He might be able to get sticky towards the end, but in order to release the psychoactive effects of cannabis, it has to be heated. So I felt very safe, growing this all around him.
Can you can we just nerd out for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
Can you take us from that baby seedling into some of the really unique things that happen when you're growing weed?
Sure. And maybe for this, Jamie, let's undo the presentation, the little PowerPoint, so I can show you guys some pictures. Is cannabis safe to grow in a garden where there are pets? Sorry, I'm also really good at monitoring the comments. Yes, it's totally safe to grow in a garden where pets might nibble. Again, there's nothing, I mean, you're going to lose some of your crop. So I don't know, maybe you'll be mad at your dog, but they're not going to get high. There's nothing you can do. So this is a picture of me planting one of those seed babies in the garden. And let's see, you can go to the next one. Right. Okay. So let's nerd out. So it turns out that weed is a super interesting plant. So it's dioecious, which means there are separate male and female plants. And this is incredibly rare in gardening and in the edible world. So a few things that come to mind that are dioecious are kiwi. You need a male and a female to get pollination, to get the fruit. Asparagus, spinach, but who cares, because you're not growing your spinach for its flowers. If it's flowering, you're done with it. But with weed, you have male and female. So on the right, are they going to find it tasty? Oh, like, are your animals going to eat it? No, they're going to mostly leave it alone. Everyone I know, and deer don't love it because deer will eat it if it's, deer will eat anything if they're hungry, right? If they're hungry enough. But as the plant grows and gets stinkier and stickier, they're going to be deterred from it, like they are most smelly things. Same with other animals. So on the right is a male, and it sort of can't get more hilarious than this, because if you look closely, it's just balls. It's balls. The males have balls. That's how they form the flower. And on the left, the female has delicate little hairs. So these are, if you grow from seed, unless you get feminized seed, you have to do something. You have to sex the plants. And when I learned about this term, sexing the plants, I was just like, yeah, I'm in. Cool. Like, I've never had to sex my plants before. Sign me up. And so, though I smoked weed all through high school that was full of seeds, that is apparently a huge no-no these days. You do not want seeds in your weed. And so a perfect crop depends on unpollinated female flowers. So you want to cull the males, and which is fun. You get a magnifying glass, you look closely, you like text your friends being like, balls, hairs, because it's like a little tricky for a while. And then you get rid of all the dudes, and you have these like incredibly sexually frustrated female flowers that are just getting, stickier and smellier, trying to get that pollen. Weed is it's a hot season annual. It's a tomato. It grows one and done, one season and it's done. You can go to the next slide, I think, is the pretty puffball flowers. So another reason that it's so fun to grow from home is like, if you buy bud in the dispensary, it just kind of looks like a turd, right? They all kind of look the same. And when you grow weed, you get to know a plant for its entire life cycle. I don't care if you like weed or not. Like, when you have these iconic cannabis leaves growing in your garden, you feel like such a badass. You like add 10 points of coolness. And these flowers, these don't look like turds. This is before they get dried and turd-like. You get to witness the whole life cycle. So yeah, it's very easy. So weed is very easy as a plant to grow. It grows fast. It's actually a great gateway crop to other gardening if you haven't gardened, because it grows so fast. It's a really fun plant to grow. It gets sticky, it gets smelly. And then if you go to the next slide, I think there's just some pretty pictures of it growing. Yeah, grow it in containers, grow it in the ground. It's pretty hard to mess up the growing part. And then you can go to the next one where it does get, oh yeah, see, there's proof. proof. I grew my weed. It's so pretty, right? It's like such an interesting plant. And then you can keep going where it does get tricky. Oh, I actually cut it out, but it's in the book. So where it does remind me of quinoa, if any of you have grown quinoa, which is fun until it's not, is when you harvest it, it does take some post-processing. So you have to, you have to dry it and cure it. And, a lot of the weed lingo is, they make it really, really intimidating, Part of this is because I think a lot of the people growing are growing to sell. And so things do need to be absolutely perfect. It has to get all these tests and blah, 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 blah. Whereas as a gardener, it's not the most mysterious thing to know how to dry something, right? Like, have you ever dried oregano? Have you ever dried rosemary? You want it in a cool, dark location. In Michigan, you probably want a dehumidifier. And it's not all that complicated. And then you get all this beautiful bud. And I think if you see in that picture on the left, it doesn't look like the turds that you buy at the dispensary. And that's, all of that like super weird trimming, manicuring that makes it look like this weird little bud is really just what the market is into right now. But all of the growers that I spoke to, they actually store theirs much like this picture on the left, where they keep more of those, they're called sugar leaves, more of the sugar leaves connected. And first of all, it makes this whole like trimming, I don't know how much y'all know, but like cannabis farmers, they like sweat the trimming process. Like that's when you like are hiring all these people to like come and trim, and it's so laborious, and it's really not that big of a deal when you're a home gardener and you have a couple of plants in your backyard and you're not trimming to like excess. So when you can trim it like this, and then you take it out and you trim it up as needed, and then you have these perfectly preserved buds, and your kids or your grandkids or your friends are just like, whoa, you grew that, so it's a lot simpler of a process. Yeah, somebody said, what climate is the best suited for cannabis? Lisa, may I answer this, dear moderator?
Please do.
So cannabis, my friends, cannabis is among the oldest cultivated plants in the world. In fact, it might be the oldest cultivated plant in the world. It might be one of the plants it was one of the plants, if not the plant, that settled us from nomadic to agricultural. It was so multi-purpose. The seeds, the flowers, the fiber, all of it. And it was these really multi-purpose plants that humans were first interested in selecting for certain qualities. And that is the birth of breeding. That is how breeding started. And so cannabis, though it's native to China, this plant has been brought everywhere in the world. Okay. It is a warm season summer annual. It can grow everywhere in the world. As it was brought around the world, it evolved based on the climate as well as what humans were breeding for. So those two things, make the diversity of genetics that we have to choose from. If you've heard the terms indica and sativa, that's where these terms come from. They are incredibly outdated and inaccurate when it comes to describing a high. So how you usually hear of indica and sativa is like, indica gets you like couch lock, that means sleepy, body buzz, and sativa gets you like cerebral buzzy. By the way, completely made up. Everything is a hybrid. Ignore it all. Also, you need to self-experiment. I don't care what I'm trying. I have all of these products that say like sleep, and I've crossed them out with a Sharpie and written dance and clean, because for me, it all does the same thing. So anyway, but where you can think of sativa and indica is historically, sativas are the cultivars that were brought to equatorial climates. So they grew really tall, and they took a super long time to finish because the sunshine is sort of endless. And indicas were ones that were brought to more northern regions with shorter, colder growing seasons. So while anything you get, I promise, anything you get is a hybrid of those two because of all the many hundreds of years of breeding. In a climate like Michigan, you want to look for something that has something pointing to indica or something north, something that hints to a shorter growing season. And then the relationship to hemp is a super interesting question. So historically, so it's all the same. So taxonomists don't agree on this, okay? Taxonomists will still tell you, oh, cannabis sativa variety, something, something. Oh, cannabis indica. But genetically, now the testing is in. There is one plant, okay? It is cannabis sativa. That's it. There's one genus and one species, okay? So it's all breeding within that. Sort of like how kale and cabbage and broccoli, they're all also the same genus species. There's just variety in them. So historically, hemp meant plants bred for fiber. That's all it meant, was plants bred for fiber. These days, hemp has a different meaning. The term is sort of, I don't know if the word is co-opted, but these days, hemp refers to any plant that has less than 0.03% THC by weight, which is basically a way to say it's got CBD in it. It's high CBD. So we're using the word hemp to describe CBD-rich plants, which are not necessarily fiber. They're not necessarily grown for fiber. They're grown for this other cannabinoid. And CBD right now is like a fan favorite because it does not have psychoactive properties. And there is a total rush around putting CBD in anything and everything with the promise that it will cure you of anything and everything. That research is not in. We know it to be useful in epileptic seizures for children. You know, it's the first drug that was approved. But a lot of this, like, it's going to cure your X, Y, and Z, people need to be very skeptical of. Try it. It's not going to hurt you. Try it. There's really nowhere to go except to try it for yourself. And then there's one question: how have you grown it hydroponically? No, sorry, I'm like outdoors. I grow my weed in the soil with a bunch of compost, and you can grow it hydroponically. And there are all of those books on the market. You can go get yourself an electrician's handbook. You know, like this is outdoors sunshine. I am a lazy gardener, which is sort of self-deprecating, but I actually mean it as like I mean something by it. I plant things in a lot of compost. I give them the conditions they need from the start, which is in weeds case full sun, which in an outdoor world means 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. You don't have to worry about any of this 12 hours and blah, 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 and you don't worry about that when you're growing outside. You just grow it outside. And plenty of airflow between plants. And I water with drip irrigation to not get the leaves wet, to cause problems with, powdery mildew. And that's it. So I grow in sunshine, and my garden doesn't survive unless things can survive with some tough love. So that is my approach. So no, I'm sorry, I have not grown hydroponically.
So, Johanna, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to an observation I have rolling around in my head and that we have talked about. I'm seeing, I'm sure as many folks are, the similarity between when I was not alive then, when alcohol was under prohibition. And, coming out of that, and like all alcohol is like the wooden boxes and with the big X's on it, and like, oh, booze, oh, drunks, like just like this like heaviness around it. And it feels like, honestly, with the help of your book, that we're moving out of that stigma with weed, because there are so many uses for this plant, and everyone is in it for something different. And there are all these little minutia. You can find your dancing clean and your fiber. And can you talk a little bit about that, like, momentum that you're feeling with that as we move into this new way of relating to this plant?
Yeah, and it's actually something I discuss in the book is you know, this comparison to alcohol, to, you know, the moonshine that just got you, it transported well and it got you messed up. That's all we were after. And that's similar to weed. While it was illegal, you know, the only thing that was bred for is to get you as absolutely stoned as possible, just maximizing THC. And there really is so much potential behind this plant. There's 100+ cannabinoids, you know, that do all sorts of things that we're just discovering, that might be anti-inflammatory, that might be immune modulating, that might be, I don't know, all these things, you know. And now we like to drink our rosé in the sun on a blanket, you know. And I have with the pandemic, I actually have become a little bit more of a user than I was at the time of at least writing this book. And I have found that for me, a very low dose, 1 to 3 milligrams, which I consume. I'm still learning how to titrate, like smoking it. But if I get these gummies, and 1 to 3 milligrams, I am so patient with my child. I'm not impaired. My husband still trusts me to be lead parent. But oh my gosh, I can make train tracks, little Brio train tracks for as many hours as he wants to, you know? So I find it really calming to my nervous system at these incredibly low doses. You know, a lot of people swear that it can do a lot of things for you. If one more person tells me to try CBD for my rheumatoid arthritis, I'm going to smack them, because for me, that is not what manages my rheumatoid arthritis. But good on ya. And maybe one day we'll find the right mix of things that does it for you. But I think people need to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism, and certainly don't believe. I don't know who has the job of writing like the high descriptions, but they're nonsense. They're nonsense. So the only way
it's the same person that names nail polish, right?
Right, totally. Yeah. Smells like your grandma's closet and makes you really horny. Okay, sure. Like whatever. You know, you just have to try, go slow. Start low, go slow. There's some saying that people say. Yeah.
I will admit I was nervous to have a public interview with you live on YouTube, and I have a dropper of CBD and a couple under the tongue. I'm good.
There you go. There you go.
What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to talk about the different people who grow, just in terms of, the diversity of that. So for me, this project was really, really funny. It was like, haha, I don't have a picture in the slideshow, but I can show you. The book is dedicated to high school Johanna. If you can see, I'm wearing my thrift store shirt and my hemp necklace. This is my mom's least favorite of all of my school pictures. So this project was really funny for a long time for me. Like, ha ha. I guess I never finished circled that loop. So when I wrote for the San Francisco Chronicle, I wrote a 10-part series and learned a lot, mind blown, sexing plants, you know, all this stuff. But finding really basic information for an outdoor grow was hard to find. So that's why I wrote this book. Photographed by a lifestyle photographer who has traveled the world shooting covers for travel magazines. You know, it's really elevated. It's all outdoors, all beautiful. But it was all very funny to me. It was like, haha, high school Johanna is like, yeah, it all makes sense now, you know, and sort of treating it like a joke. And then I do have a chapter about that profiles different growers. And that is when the project really, really deepened in meaning to me and stopped being like hilarious and started being something that I would take a little bit more seriously. And Jamie, there are a few slides. Not there. Actually, let's go up a bit. It's there you go. Okay, so that's Johnny Casali. And he is a second generation farmer up in Humboldt, and his mom moved into the country for a different lifestyle, and he, weed was the cash crop to support their living, and he grew weed just like he grew zucchini. And he got busted, first time offense, 10 years in prison, spent all of his 20s in federal prison. And, you know, now is like a huge advocate for outdoor, fish safe, farming really sustainably. And when you meet people who've spent time in prison for a plant that they just learned to grow from their mom, like it stops becoming hilarious and starts being like a little bit more serious about, you know, honoring this plant and what people have done to grow it. And then if you go to the next one, this is from a woman named Penny's garden. Penny lives not far from me. I've written about her in Sunset Magazine for like totally other reasons. A rose cocktail that she makes that's rose colored. It's amazing. And now she is actually devout member of the Presbyterian Church, and she is so into cannabis for her aches and pains, and because she thinks it's a cool plant, and she is getting her church group on it slowly, because everybody's like, I don't know about this. And I don't know if there are any more profile pics, but there's a whole chapter. What's next? Oh yeah, no. There's a whole chapter on grower profiles. We can go into this. Should we go into this?
Yeah, I would love to.
So, yeah. So for me, cannabis has remained really interesting. You know, being a garden writer was like the coolest thing ever, right? Forever, I could like turn my attention to something new and write about it. It was like a kid in a candy store. And then, you know, 10 years later, I mean, I still love it. I still love plants, but like, there's only so many times you can tell people what to do in their gardens in March, right? And there's only so many backyard design stories where so-and-so had a problem and then they fixed it. Look at this beautiful garden. And for me right now, cannabis continues to be just a really exciting space to work in because of how much is happening in it. And I mean, for one thing, like, I just totally blanked out on what I was going to say. You know, there's so many stories to tell that people haven't been told. People don't have the language connecting it to the larger gardening community. We still have a long way to go on just like stable genetics, those things I was talking about. And then for me personally, what happened this summer around the time of George Floyd and everything that happened in our sort of collective waking up is that I reflected back on my beautiful book that I love and am so proud of. And my entire chapter on grower profiles is a bunch of white people, which is so similar to my tenure at Sunset Magazine, because when you're after the prettiest gardens that are available to shoot right away, you know, you get a bunch of white people who have it, you know, in the bag. And so I, as my own sort of course correction, I wanted to, like, not knowing anywhere where it would lead, I wanted to find Black cannabis gardeners and photograph them and get to know them. It's sort of become a life of its own. I've written a piece that is really outside my wheelhouse, that will be published at some point on a site called repco.com. I can put it in the thing later. But anyway, and what I discovered a lot of things in doing this project. You know, this is a population. So we're here talking about this legal industry and this beautiful book, et cetera, et cetera. And there are 44,000 people that still remain incarcerated because of cannabis related crimes. So it's, you know, it's a real mismatch. And this population of, you know, Black people have been specifically targeted for their use. So to find growers that are willing to talk to me openly and discuss their relationships to the plant historically and why they grow now. Calvin on the left grows for arthritis. He hadn't touched the plant since the 70s, and then when it was legal on a whim, he picks some up from the dispensary and in his words, loved everything about it except the price. So he decided to learn to grow his own. And this woman, Dejanay, on the right, she's in LA, and what I learned from her is that so my photographer went down. I knew it would be okay. I knew the shoot would be okay. She has, she's gorgeous. There's a bougainvillea plant, a beautiful cement wall, and some lush cannabis. Like I knew Rachel, my photographer, would make it work. You know, when she got there, Rachel said it was rough. You know, it's not this like turnkey ready garden, but you know, they were able to, they found this beautiful chair and they staged her around the chair. And I mean, you get these, I still like really beautiful photographs, which is something to unpack some other time about our standards of beauty, et cetera, et cetera. But I still like these, you know, gorgeous photos that bring a reader or, you know, viewer in. And she was able to create magic with a little bit of effort. And when you are willing to do that work, you get to tell a lot more diverse stories and a lot more interesting stories. So for me, actually, as a why cannabis has been so exciting is, well, to bring it full circle to Michigan. So when I went to the University of Michigan, I studied sociology. You know, I was doing like, I was staffing we called it a name that should be bleeped out, a blank truck. Anyway, that did mobile HIV/AIDS testing in Ypsilanti, and I was teaching creative writing at Western Wayne Correctional Facility, and I was just really like a social justice kid. And then my path changed. I got interested in farming, and I ended up in a deeply creative field, which has been great. I love what I do, and it's been cannabis that has been the thing that is allowing me to sort of circle back to these issues of inequity, and still while, you know, being my plant loving, writing loving person. And so it really remains an interesting plant to me. And then actually, Jamie, if you go up a little bit to, yeah, that one. What also is interesting is that we are just at the tip of the iceberg with this plant. Really so you know, people are now breeding for all sorts of things besides just THC. And you know, in the ornamental horticultural world, my contacts there, horticulturalists there, they are really excited to get going on breeding. But these are the people that earn their money when they patent plants, when they patent the cultivars that end up in your nursery. And so they're not going to do this until it's federally legal. But, you know, I can't wait for variegated leaves and, you know, all sorts of things. So this is a cultivar called Freak Show that was bred for a mutation in the leaf. And it's so cool. I mean, it looks like a Japanese maple or a fern. And I grew it this year, and I have to say, it smells so bad. I really don't want anything. I go by my nose. I don't have a very sophisticated palate. You know, I worked 10 years at Sunset with a wine editor, and I'm still like, like it, don't like it. So this one was like a don't like it for me. And you might notice that I use the word cultivar all the time, and I don't call it strain, because that is one of these stupid words that, you know, cannabis lingo, a bunch of bros in their basements, no offense if some of you are in the audience, you know, started calling it strain. This is not a word that we use in gardening. This is a word we use about like coronavirus or influenza, you know. This is a different realm. And so cultivar is the word for that we want to be using, or variety. We misuse the word variety pretty colloquially, but cultivar that's what we're talking about. It's been cultivated. It's been chosen by someone and bred for those reasons. Okay, I really went off on some stuff there.
I love all that. I just want to pause and really make sure that folks listening have noticed that you and this is something that I've experienced, and I think why we connect. There's the thing that you do. You write a book, or you make a piece of public art. And there's the life of the thing, right? And then the author or the artist has gone through the experience of creating it. And that is, that's its own thing. And that is a whole story. And sometimes those stories don't get told because people want the pretty pictures and they want the book and they want to like see the art, right? And that's what I find so interesting about taking time to dig deeper. You have written this book that you eagerly accepted your assignment. I don't know much. Like, where do I get seeds? I don't know. And you went in and learned in the same kind of pathway that we learn as gardeners. How do we grow this? Oh my gosh, this is similar to this. It's not like this. Wow, it's cool. And what you have discovered is that there is, there's this tie-in with what you were passionate about years ago with social justice, and that the pathways that maybe you and I and other people who look like us can easily walk right into, those pathways are not as open and not as clear for other folks. This is not my interview, so I won't go into experiences that I have had similar to what you've gone through with the book, but I will say I have been continually humbled and educated being a white artist in a majority Black city and learning how I want to live as an artist in that capacity. So I want to just say to thank you for sharing the experience of writing the book. And I just want to pull out anything else that you want to mention about, what's holding your attention and what you are hoping that cannabis will kind of continue to be your vehicle for as you move forward.
Well, I think I'm shocked by how much can change in however many years. I really spent high school grounded. I don't mean like grounded, but like grounded for smoking weed. And it was like a very failed zero tolerance policy in my house. And now I sort of joke about it in the book. Each chapter begins with like an anecdote of my own experience and then the nitty gritty of how to do what's talked about in the book. So, I talk about it in the book. My mom kind of turns out she doesn't drink at all. It makes her sick. She kind of likes weed. And, just being able to connect about that, to be able to talk about it more lightly. I have spoken now at a few Jewish book festivals, and I'm always braced for it to be a little too edgy for people. And I'm really surprised. I continue to be surprised by everybody's curiosity. And I think that's something that we did talk about a lot, is that idea of like looking into your own, what's blocking you from being curious. Could it be something like systemic that's taught you that something is scary when it's not? Because I think everybody's really curious. I had an email from someone local in Berkeley who like his name is like Chaim Moshe something, and he sent me a picture of him like trimming his weed in his sukkah, and all lit up. And somebody else just emailed me on Thanksgiving saying, you're on my who does this? Some people are so nice. You're on my Thanksgiving thank you list. My wife got me your book, and I spent my summer, when people ask me how I spent my pandemic summer, I spent it growing cannabis for the first time. So I'm really excited about, where my curiosity is taking me is, of course, weird, deep plant geekery / social justice. But I'm just really excited for everyone to be a little bit more comfortable looking into this plant, be it for medicinal health, be it for calming your nervous system, be it because you like it more than alcohol and you don't have a hangover, be it because it also connects you to thinking through some things with social justice, be it because it gets you out in the garden and it gets you breathing fresh air and interacting with the earth, whatever. I just think I'm just really excited to be a part of something like this. I am like a nerdy gardener, and so I am really not used to being a part of anything that's happening right now. I live in the Bay Area. The tech boom is like I've just like kind of watched it go by me as I'm like in the dirt digging. And so to suddenly be involved in something that feels like a movement for all of these various reasons, it's just terribly exciting. And it's far more inclusive than it used to be with, you know, stoner culture. And there is a place for you as a gardener, curious person to find some footing in there. So yeah.
I would love to do something very silly and quote Jennifer Jewell from an interview that you did with her. But she quoted Annie Redbird, and I just could not get this quote out of my head, so I'd love to share it here. It is those uncomfortable territories in our own minds or lives that are masked by prejudice, which calling out to us, asking us to wonder more about them. I love that, where it's really questioning, is the stigma worth backing off, right? When going through this book, there's so much interesting new stuff to experiment with in the garden as a plant. It's so wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to say before maybe we open it up to some Q&A?
No, people send your questions. Don't be shy. No, please talk. Include us in your questions.
Thank you, Joanna and Lisa, for being with us and for such an illuminating discussion. And thank you all at home for joining us today. Our next event is today at 1:30 when we present Erica Katz, author of The Boys Club. So join us. And remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and buy Joanna's book. You can do all of this by visiting our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. And you'll get our full schedule, and you'll find out how you can buy the book. Stay safe and have a great day.